go. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. There we go.
I'm still learning the tech on this thing. We'll figure it out eventually. So that's Nigel coming in to the Reform Conference. He's got fireworks, he's got a filled out stadium there, huge cheers, clearly a lot of love for him. People seem to like him a bit more than Keir Starmer, don't they, Nicholas?
Oh, completely. I mean, I was on staff at the Reform Conference, and I was, of course, there the night before the conference opened. I was involved in the planning of everything. And Nigel's entrance was one of the most meticulously choreographed events of the whole day. He was originally meant to come out from the back, but he decided he wanted to go out from the front instead and actually walk through the crowds, which made for a very powerful image. And of course, you have the sparklers, which I was watching them set up the previous night. I must say, all the time and effort that went into this conference was just astounding. And I truly wish everyone could have seen all the behind-the-scenes things that went on, because I mean, it was like clockwork. It was a fantastic operation, and yes, Nigel is very much more liked than Keir Starmer. I was in the hall when he went on. I was actually situated on top of the Brexit bus, or the Basel bus, whatever they like to call it, and I was looking around at the entire stadium, watching 4,500 people scream and cheer as Nigel walked in. It was a very powerful sight. And I'll tell you right now, I'd say the Reform Conference has been a hell of a lot livelier than the Labour Conference. I mean, you know, everyone at the Reform Conference was so happy, smiles abound, whilst at the Labour Conference it's sort of an atmosphere of dread, even though they're the ones in power. And we ended up with 5 seats after being cheated by our first-past-the-post electoral system. So overall, I'd say that Reform is in a much better state than Labour at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that such a small party with only 5 MPs has been able to put on such a powerful, incredible event by the looks of it. Now, Eunice, you weren't able to attend, but I think that you can certainly see from that clip and from many clips we saw Nigel Farage arriving at the Doncaster races, everyone wanting to get selfies with him and chat to him, whilst Keir Starmer was booed on the way in. Now, I think it's clear that Nigel Farage is more of a powerful, exciting figure than Keir Starmer is. But I'm just thinking how they're going to fare against the Tories. It's looking like Robert Jenrick is probably going to win the leadership election. You might disagree. Maybe you think it will be someone like Kemi. I mean, let me know what you think, Eunice. But if he is against someone like Robert Jenrick, how do you think that's going to play out? You know, given, I mean, you might think differently, but I think Robert Jenrick seems like quite a plain personality compared to Nigel. How much do you think that personality is worth versus policy?
So I think Robert Jenrick is going to win. And unfortunately, in the politics that we have now, we just have a bunch of career politicians that have no charisma whatsoever. Keir Starmer being one of them, Rishi Sunak was another one, and Jenrick is another one. And you know, Nigel Farage is the rock star of British politics. And you said that we only have 5 seats, but as Nicholas said, we got 6 million votes, or more than 4 million votes.
So we should have 4.1 million.
Yeah, 4.1 million. So in reality, we should have 150 seats. But because of the system that we have, we only have 5 seats, which is ridiculous. Reform are the 3rd biggest party in the country right now. In some polls, they're even bigger than the Conservatives. So I just don't buy it, and I think like our electoral system needs a reform. In terms of, you know, going forward, I feel like people are just fed up of establishment politicians, because I was watching the Labour conference. It was just a snooze fest, you know, Keir Starmer's speech and everyone just coming up, whereas Reform, it was energy, there was people, there was like almost like a Trump rally, you know. Nigel Farage is our Donald Trump. But then the problem is, again, it's one individual going against the establishment. And as we know, the establishment, the mainstream media, BBC, they don't like Nigel Farage, right? So they will do anything in their power to stop. But the people are awake. The people are right behind Nigel Farage. He's a very popular character, as you said. He goes everywhere and there's people like lining up to take pictures with him. Whereas when Keir Starmer goes to a pub, the pub owner tells him to get out of his pub. So he's a popular character. But as I know, this is not a fair game. This is the unfortunate thing. This is not a fair game. Popular characters, they get vindicated by the media. You can see it with Trump in America, and you can see it with Nigel Farage here.
Yeah, and I just want to also show you guys another clip from the conference of, not Nigel this time, but Richard Tice. Hopefully you guys can see this all right. This, you know, I felt like this just showed that it is a party that's just willing to say what everyone's thinking, but everyone else is too cowardly to say. So take a listen to what Richard Tice had to say here.
And they're in the water if they're off their vessel.
Maritime law says if they're in distress, if they're in danger. Read the treaty. I've read it. I know the clauses. I know the sentences.
So every migrant on a small boat falls into that category.
Absolutely right. Of course. How many people have died this year? Literally died. Do you know? 45 that we know of crossing the channel. If they'd followed my policy of pick up and take back, all those people would be alive. This kind and compassionate bollocks from these lefty lawyers, these human rights people, the media, it's killing people. It's blood on your hands, all of you.
Okay, well then can I ask, if it's that easy, and if that's within the law, why isn't it happening?
Because they haven't got the courage of their convictions. And also, lots of people on this side of the channel, lots of big businesses and lawyers are making a huge amount of money, thank you very much, and hotel owners, so they don't want it to stop. But if the Australians did it, what are the Belgians doing? The Belgian authorities are complying with their international treaty law. They're picking up and taking back, and guess what? The boat stopped. The French need to do the same. If they don't, we must do it on their behalf.
Okay.
Well, Nicholas, what do you think? Do you think that he's got the law wrong and actually he can't take the boats back? Or do you think that all the politicians that are saying, oh, we got to send them to Rwanda, we got to smash the gangs or whatever it is, they're just missing the obvious trick and are too scared to do it?
Well, Richard Tice is absolutely right, and he has the courage of his convictions. I mean, he's a very powerful speaker. In fact, I thought that his address at the conference was second to Nigel, quite frankly. I mean, he gave a really terrific, passionate speech, and I'm not just saying this because I work for Isabel. I'm saying this because I truly mean it. And I actually remember being just off camera as he gave that interview, as I tried to shadow him for a bit during the conference, at the request of a couple of people. And the way in which he speaks and the way in which he articulates himself is incredibly powerful. And he is one of the only politicians in the House of Commons right now that's actually really, really, really capable of speaking their mind, but more importantly, capable of articulating their points in such a way that everybody can understand and everybody can agree with him. Because let's face it, he knows what he's talking about. Most of these talking heads from the Labour Party have no idea what they're going on about. I mean, look at Wes Streeting's interview yesterday. He comes across like he has absolutely no idea what he's doing, probably because he doesn't. Meanwhile, we can see this with reform. We saw this with Lee Anderson's speech. We saw this with James McMurdoch's speech, Rupert Lowe's speech, Zia Youssef's speech. We know what we're doing. You know, these people are worth their weight in salt. Our representatives, even though we were cheated out of 100-odd MPs, as Eunice said, we have 5 really brilliant ones. And I'll tell you right now, Richard Tice is doing a spectacular job, and he is absolutely right. All of these politicians who are demanding we spend tens of millions on taxpayer dime to send all these people off to Rwanda, really, all we need to do is pick them up, take them back to France.
I mean, that's a really interesting point you make, Nicholas, about the fact that the Reform MPs we've got, although we've only got 5 of them, they're very strong and they really know what they're talking about. Whereas a lot of the Labour MPs, not just MPs, but the people, top of cabinet, seem to have no idea what they're talking about. Because the argument that's often made against voting reform is, oh, their heart's in the right place. They're talking a lot about the issues that people care about, but we can't really trust them to run the country. They're brand new. They've got no idea what they're talking about. I mean, Eunice, what do you think? Do you think if, let's say next general election, Reform were able to pull off something magnificent that might involve a coalition, that might not, and they were able to get into power, do you think that they would actually be experienced enough to run the country properly?
Yes, 100%. I think this past general election, they were experienced enough, because all you had to do, you had to read through their contract with the people, or manifesto, as other parties call it, and you look at the policies, and is the policies exact policies that this country needs. And actually, I was going to stand as an MP reform for West Ham, and I actually spoke to Richard Tice over the phone, but then because they told me about it on Friday and the deadline was on Monday, I couldn't get my papers in on time, and there was a whole vetting process, and unfortunately I couldn't get it. But as I was talking to Richard Tice over the phone, he told me that, look, we know that we probably won't win any London boroughs. So all you have to do is you just have to go and stand there, and we have to try to get as many votes. And I was like, why is that, Richard? Why don't you believe in yourself that you can win any boroughs in London? And he was like, look, our system is corrupt. We have the Conservatives and Labour that are going to dominate. That seat will most likely go to a Labour politician. But I was like, look, West Ham is actually a very diverse area. Because, I've worked in the West Ham Stadium, and you get a lot of people very passionate about politics, and you get people coming in, they have all kinds of different opinions, and they don't seem like the type that would vote for Labour. I was like, actually, as a matter of fact, I think that a lot of people in West Ham would be voting for reform. And he said, yeah, you're right, but at the same time, we don't have the game grounds, we don't have the money that these other parties have, like Labour and Conservatives, we don't have the same amount of donors that they have. So unfortunately, reform needs to get the donors, need to get the ground game strong, where people go and knock on doors, give leaflets, that kind of thing, because that's what actually wins election. And what they need to do between now and 2029 is to just recruit people and get their game down, get their market. I mean, in terms of marketing, reform is brilliant. Okay, I think they are the biggest party on social media, especially TikTok. So in terms of social media, they got it right. They just need to get the ground game. They need to get their media game up, and they have to give this belief to people that, look, we can win. We can win the seats. Because the last election, they kind of, were talking in a way, as Richard was talking, that they kind of knew they're not going to win, But the next general election, they have to have this aura about them, like, we can win. We can do it. That's one, solution. Another solution is for them to collate with the Conservative Party, but I'm not really sure how likely that will be.
I mean, the Tories have shown themselves completely unwilling to have any sort of rapprochement with reform. I do think that potentially Robert Jenrick, as the leader of the Conservative Party, he and Farage could become a sort of Cameron and Clegg type duo if the situation calls for it. But I think overall, Eunice, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is a change in the atmosphere at reform. There's a new can-do attitude. I mean, Zia Yusuf strived to professionalise the party. He's cut off a lot of the staff, and he's leaving like the pure nice meat. And quite frankly, I think going into 2029 and even next year at the local elections, reform is in a fantastic space right now.
And they've been able to get more. They've been able to get more cash now. So, for example, you can see if you look online that they are hiring various regional coordinators and whatnot. They've got the cash to pay for more staff now. By just for each member of parliament they have a certain pot of money that they get for them to have staff in parliament and whatnot. So cash was definitely an issue early on, but now slowly but surely, as they've shown, we are actually a serious party and we can make big waves. Things are starting to change. Just before we move. We've got loads of comments coming in, people angry about Starmergate, freebie Keir, or whatever you want to call it. We will be moving on to everything going on with Labour shortly. But just before we move on, Nicholas, you were talking there about Robert Jenrick, who the Tories are going to pick, how it's going to affect reform. I'm just interested to see, do you think that in terms of how they fare against reform, will a centrist candidate or a more reform-like candidate, one who copies reform's policies, be a better option for the Tories?
Well, obviously, look, for reform, our dream would be Tom Tugendhat, because, I mean, this would be absolutely beautiful reform. We'd probably win 60 to 70 seats if Tom Tugendhat became the leader of the Conservative Party, even with our rigged electoral system. Though overall, I would prefer a more centrist or more wet candidate to lead the Conservative Party, simply because that would aid reform. But in terms of, how the Conservatives are actually going to claw back, talking from their perspective, of course they want a more reform-like politician, somebody like Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick, or ideally for them, Suella Braverman, if she hadn't been bullied out of any position of power in the past.
Well, you say it like it's obvious, but they've had people like George Osborne consulting them, telling them that the way they're going to win is to move back to the centre. You've got people like George Osborne suggesting that the reason why they lost the election is that they were too right-wing. I mean, you just cannot make it up. I don't know what kind of rock these guys are living under.
Can someone explain what the centre is? Yeah,
if I recall correctly, George Osborne is no longer in Parliament, so he shouldn't really be saying anything.
No, well, you've got loads of these people who are just trying to remain relevant. I mean, we've got Tony Blair trying to run the government as well. Everyone's trying to tell everyone, I'm an old guy, I know what I'm talking about, blah, blah, blah.
There is no such thing as the centre, because I feel like our politics has gone so far to the left, that the centre now is actually centre-left and centre is centre-right. So actually, I think, I see reform as a centre-right party, but they come across as a far-right party because now the centre has moved to centre-left. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
of course.
So unfortunately, The Conservatives just don't understand that. I made videos about this. The Conservatives are not conservative anymore. They are centrist or centre-left, and Labour is actually far-left. So the only centre-right party in this country is actually Reform.
Have you got what it takes to be a reasoned presenter? Well, send us a short clip of yourself to join@reasoned.uk, and we might be seeing you on this very channel very soon indeed.